This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Free agency is such a fun time because you get to speculate on these big names that you watch, do things that you want your team to do, and hopefully sign with your team to do that thing for your team. And when it comes to free agency, I think the most exciting free agents are the big names, the ones we all know, the ones that get us super excited. So that's what I want to talk about today. Today, we're not just talking about free agency. We're talking about the big deals in free agency, the big names in free agency. So I have a hell of a list here of players that we all know, and I'm going to talk about these free agents. Should they be on the Browns? Which free agents would I be like, hey, top tier signings if the Browns are able to get this? And what free agents do I feel like would not be top tier signings, but still a really big deal? And straight up some big names that I'm like, you know what? I don't want them for whatever reason. So let's start with the I'm good people, the people that are a big name that you will hear people push for, that I'm just good on. First is Chase Young. I think I'm good on Chase Young. Chase Young is not a bad player, but I don't believe Chase Young's going to be worth the money that you sign him unless you get him under $8 million. If I were asked, hey, for the Browns this upcoming season, would I rather have Za'Darius Smith or Chase Young? I would rather have Za'Darius Smith. I would rather have the veteran player than Chase Young. I think Chase Young has been kind of coasting by off of a reputation he earned at Ohio State, but hasn't really backed up in the NFL level. Now, he's not completely been a bust or anything in the NFL. He's been a semi-productive player, but not a player that justifies where he went in the draft. And I think that's the problem with Chase Young, is that when you sign Chase Young, you're signing the ideal of Chase Young, and the ideal of Chase Young is much more expensive than the reality of Chase Young. The reality of Chase Young is a player not that different from Obo Okoronkwo or any other second-tier pass rush option that the Browns would want to run out. But the ideal of Chase Young is supposed to be of somebody of high caliber, somebody who could be one of the best young edge rushers in the NFL. And I just don't think he's living up, or he's close to living up to that ideal of him. So I would stay away from Chase Young. I think the money would be too high. I think the expectations from people would be too high. I think you will end up building too much around the defense around somebody who's not going to be able to handle the workload that you throw on him. I just want to be a huge fan of it unless you got it at like a super cheap deal. If that's the case, then okay, sure, why not? But other than that, I'm pretty much good on Chase. Calvin Ridley is another free agent that's a big name that I'm all right on. I don't really want the Browns to go after. A lot of his work in Jacksonville, if you just look at his numbers, seems fine. But when you watch the games and when you ask people who watch the games very closely for the Jacksonville Jaguars, very rarely do I hear good things being said about Calvin Ridley. And that's something you do have to watch out for, right? Because sometimes it's easy to get intoxicated with the player because you hear good things, well, not hear good things, but you see good things on the stat sheet, and maybe you watch a couple plays or watch one of their best games and you get a good impression of them and you think that they're really good. But then, the people who cover the team and really know the team that he's leaving, ain't that sad to see him go? And that's kind of the vibe that I've gotten from people in Atlanta about Calvin Ridley. And it's the same vibe that I've gotten from people in Jacksonville from Calvin Ridley. Like, nobody seems upset that he has to go. Like, they'll be more upset about the situation he's in or something like that. But it's never like, oh man, Calvin leaving, that's going to hurt. Like, I just don't really hear that from people in those spots with him on the team. And maybe that's just bad luck on those fans' part, or maybe it's kind of indicative of something there with Calvin. but he's not really the most consistent catcher of the football. I'm kind of over wide receivers who aren't the most consistent catchers of the football. To me, Calvin Ridley, Elijah Moore, same difference, right? I don't really think it would make sense to have them both on the team. And I don't think one is so much better than the other that it justifies signing Calvin Ridley. Like, I just think that Calvin Ridley's kind of overrated at this point, and I wouldn't be comfortable giving him big wide receiver money, especially when I feel like the team's needs can be handled better in other places. Now, the free agents that would be a big deal, but they're not the most hyped up names, right? Well, not the most hyped up names, but they're big names and they're big deals, right? So the first guy is Justin Madubuike. He's not on my dream list, but he's just a notch below it. Now, Justin Madubuike, for those of you who watch AFC North Talk, you would know that I've been big on him since he came out of Texas A&M, more of a pass rush specialist at the interior tackle position, but he's a disruptor. He's a chaos maker, a hellraiser in that interior. And I think if the Browns could add another hellraiser on that defensive line, whether it be in the interior or an edge, to complement some pieces that they already have, I really do think that this Browns defense has a chance to do something special next year. Another hellraiser I think would be interesting to go after would be DJ Reader, coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. This is somebody who just 2 years ago I thought was one of the most disruptive defensive players, especially in the interior in all of football. He didn't have that type of season this year, but he also was on and off the field with injuries. So, that's probably part of the reason why. And the Bengals just had a weird season as well. But DJ Reader, he would be a huge deal. Also, don't think he's going to be the most expensive interior defensive tackle that you can get. I think he's a balanced guy. He could be a pass rush threat, but he's really, really good in run defense. He's a bit older, but the Browns are at the point to where that doesn't matter as much. So I would love to see them go after him. Christian Wilkins is another hellraiser on the defensive line, somebody who could be really good in run D, kind of a balanced threat similar to DJ Reader, but younger, and a disruptor, right? A hellraiser, a disruptor, an athletic freak. You want to get more of those guys around Myles Garrett as possible, because we've seen how teams will just overcompensate for Myles Garrett. So you need to get guys who can win those one-on-one battles. And DJ Reader most certainly would take a lot of pressure off Dalvin Tomlinson, because when they slide all those double teams to Myles, the person who also ends up getting double teamed is Dalvin. So if you have another big interior threat for the Browns to kind of take that pressure off Dalvin, I think it will lead to a lot of one-on-ones in the interior and a lot of damage being done in the interior. And I think DJ Reader might be the guy there. Also, Christian Wilkins. Brian Burns is another name on the list, a good edge rusher. He's not at the top of my list, to be honest with you. I'm not the biggest Brian Burns fan, but I do think he's a productive, really good player that could fit into what the Browns are doing as well. And then I have some wide receivers on my big deal list where it would be a big name and a big deal if you're able to either trade or sign one of these guys. Michael Pittman would be a big deal. You're talking about what the Browns need at wide receiver, and they need size, I think, above everything. They need to get bigger at wide receiver, and that's been something that I feel like has been a thorn in the side of the Cleveland Browns for the last, 4 to 5 years. I mean, even before Stefanski, when they were rolling out Jarvis Landry and them, it was still a smaller wide receiver group. And we've seen consistently since we had smaller wide receivers that goal line, red zone, it's been an issue for this team. And I think that that's not a mistake, because we just don't have the size at wide receiver that you do. DeAndre Hopkins will give you a ton of size at the wide receiver position as well. But Michael Pittman would give you some size, some athleticism. He's a little bit younger, but he's also a little bit more inconsistent. I honestly, like, of all the guys on my big deal list, DeAndre Hopkins at wide receiver, I think would probably make the most noticeable difference when it comes to eye test of all of these signings, because his chemistry with Deshaun Watson is huge. Him and Deshaun's ability to be on pay is on track with each other, especially since the offense is moving towards things that Deshaun Watson is more comfortable with. By proxy, that's going to be stuff that DeAndre Hopkins is more comfortable with. So you're already getting an easy fit into both changes that you're going into this offseason with DeAndre Hopkins. He's a bigger wide receiver who gives you a bigger threat. And also, I think one of the most important things that we don't really consider is that if you're going to have three good players at one position, they need to have a good level of diversity within them. And what I mean by that is they need to be good at different things, right? The reason the Browns can run three corners out at the same time that are all pretty good is because they're all three good at different things. Martin's good at jamming guys up and being physical. Denzel's good at being fast, quick, athletic, and baiting guys. And then Greg Newsome's good at playing some of the run fit stuff and being physical with not linebackers, but being physical with tight ends and kind of getting up in there and doing that zone corner work. And they all three kind of work together in those roles to be out there. The same thing with the Bengals, right? They're able to roll out T. Higgins, roll out Jamar Chase, and roll out Tyler Boyd because all three of those guys have different skill sets. Tyler Boyd's more of a possession receiver. T. Higgins is more like an Amari Cooper type, where he's got kind of just an excellent route runner, has that good speed, that balanced receiver. And then Jamar Chase is a take the top off the defense type wide receiver. And since they all three do different things, they're all three able to be used better because they're all going to be on every play doing something that they're good at. And that's the thing with DeAndre Hopkins. You don't have to get rid of Amari Cooper because Amari Cooper can still do what Amari Cooper does when DeAndre Hopkins is in there, because you're not asking DeAndre Hopkins to be Amari Cooper, nor are you asking DeAndre Hopkins to be Amari Cooper. You're asking them to do two different things. And then even Elijah Moore can eat because nobody's going to be asked to take the top off the defense. That's still going to be Elijah's responsibility. So all of those things kind of combine together for moves that I feel like would help balance this wide receiver room and really make them lethal at all three levels. And then I think if you do get that from D-Hop and you do get that from Amari Cooper, that's going to make Elijah Moore even that much more dangerous. And even if you could throw in somebody like a Marquise Goodwin or Marquise Brown or whoever you want to make the deep threat of this team, I think that could work as well. But Michael Pittman, I would think that's a big deal. But DeAndre Hopkins to me would be a bigger deal. I understand he's older and some people don't like him because he's older, but he's still playing good football, right? We saw him play in Houston, playing at a high level. He's still capable and he has the type of game that'll age well because it's never been too predicated on his just pure explosiveness. It's just been about size, leverage, and hand use, and that's going to age well, in my opinion. Now let's move on to the big names, the guys that I feel like if the Browns can land one of these guys, it's not just a big deal. It's a dream list deal. It is a super, super big deal. It changes how you think of the Cleveland Browns entirely. If you can land one of these guys, if you land two of them, oh my God. But if you can land one of these guys, it changes the equation about the Cleveland Browns. First guy on this list is Chris Jones. If you get Chris Jones, how you think about the Cleveland Browns changes. We talked about there being a hellraiser on this defense with DJ Reader or Christian Watkins, and those are good players. They're nowhere close to Chris Jones. Chris Jones is a freak of nature, is a top tier level defensive threat on his own right. And if you were going to pair him up with what looks to be the defensive player of the year, oh man, y'all know I love defensive line play. I love the trenches. I love getting into the trenches with defensive line play. And you could just see it on my face if I just bring up the ideal of Chris Jones being on this defensive line. Hey man, cancel Christmas. If they stayed healthy, Chris Jones on a defensive line with Myles Garrett, and hell, you could probably still bring back Maurice Hurst. Who knows? Maybe Za'Darius is willing to take a pay cut just to be a part. Oh my God, you got Obo Okoronkwo still around and Isaiah McGuire still developing, and you might be able to draft some. Oh my goodness, man. I get giddy at the thought of Chris Jones in a Cleveland Browns uniform. it would be the biggest deal that the Browns could do. Like all of these other guys I'm going to mention would be huge, game-changing players to bring to the Cleveland Browns. And this is already a great roster, a roster that was so damn good this year that they lost 26% of the salary cap investment and still won 11 games and made it to the playoffs. That's how damn good this is. This probably still, like, Browns could literally do nothing, re-sign a couple people and still be the best roster in football, or one of the best 5 rosters in all of football. They could do that literally. If they bring in Chris Jones, it's canceled Christmas. That's the best roster in football. I don't care what anybody else has to say. This team is going very far, or the expectations are that they should go very far. Because imagine Chris Jones next to Myles Garrett. Imagine, and then you still got Dalvin Tomlinson. You had Chris Jones. So who are you doubling? Who are you? You gonna double Myles, obviously, but then you gonna stack? Like what you gonna do? What you gonna rotate? How you gonna protect that? You gonna run 13 the whole damn game? Like what you gonna do? 13 and 2-step drops? I beg you. We got Denzel Ward and Craig New. The thought of Chris Jones on this defense. And look, Chris Jones going to be a free agent, by the way. He didn't sign a franchise tag. He signed a 1-year deal. And they don't seem interested in franchising tagging Chris Jones. So it could happen. It really could happen. And if it does, oh my God, y'all. Oh my God. That would change everything. Now, again, these names I'm going to bring up, they're big, but I'm not as excited about them. And it's not because they're not good players. It's not because I don't think the Browns will be better with them. It's just simply because Chris Jones on this defensive line, you still got JOK. You still got Grant Delpit. You still got Denzel Ward. You still got Obo Okoronkwo. You still got Dalvin Tomlinson and Myles Garrett. And you add Chris Jones. Look, if the Browns did that, the video of Chris Jones signs with the Cleveland Browns would, one, come out immediately. Hell, it might be a live stream. I would just keep it real with you. It might be a live stream and it just be me crying for the first 15 minutes. That's the level of excitement I would have if the Browns were able to get their hands on Chris Jones, because I can't imagine it. It would be the most diabolical thing to happen to offensive linemen ever. It would just, like, the offensive linemen would talk about this like horrible news. You would go on offensive lineman podcasts and they just be stressed, like, oh my God, bro. Myles and Chris Jones. If I would retire. I would retire if they were able to do that. Not me, but if I were an offensive lineman, I would just straight up retire if the Browns were able to do that. That would be such a huge deal. These other guys are huge deals. I don't want to undersell them. Next guy on this list, T. Higgins. If you can get T. Higgins one, it would be funny because it would make Bengals fans laugh, and as professional as we supposed to be, or as mature as we supposed to be. That's kind of funny, right? When you get one of the old players and then you get, it's always funny. But in all seriousness, T. Higgins is a really good player, gives you some of that threat stuff. Now, the issue with T. Higgins, I think, is you do definitely have to get rid of Amari Cooper if you get T. Higgins. And it has less to do about money and more to do about fit. You're bringing T. Higgins in to be basically Amari Cooper, but younger and faster. That's what you're bringing T. Higgins in for. And I don't know if that's necessarily the fit that they're looking for, but it ain't going to hurt. It definitely ain't going. You're going to be better doing what you got to do to get T. Higgins on this team than without. And it might not be popular, but it would be better. Like, it's straight up what T. Higgins is that good. I think T. Higgins has been a number one receiver for quite a while. Mike Evans is the one on, like, Chris Jones, Mike Evans. Now, if they found a way to get both of them, I'd cry. But Mike Evans is the one that I have circled because Mike Evans is everything that I want. He's a big target, 6'8" wingspan. I believe he's 6'5" standing. He has those super long arms. He's able to get downfield. He's able to attack downfield. He's a consistent catcher of the football, and he's elevated literally every quarterback he's ever played with. Tom Brady looked better than he did in New England with him, even though Tom Brady's still really good, right? We saw what he did with Baker Mayfield. Hell, he convinced the Browns to take Johnny Manziel with the 22nd overall pick. So, yeah, Mike Evans, if you can get your hands on Mike Evans, that's like DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Pittman are in the neighborhood of what I'm looking for. But what I am looking for the Browns to add at wide receiver is Mike Evans. That, like, every time I describe what the Browns need at wide receiver, I'm basically describing Mike Evans. We need a bigger receiver who can get downfield and win 50-50 balls. Who the hell that sound like to you? That sound like Mike Evans to me. So, yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, he can fit that description, or maybe Michael Pittman can fit that description, but the description is Mike Evans. He's also a good culture fit. He kind of blends in with how this team operates, right? Not the biggest off the field presence, but somebody who just puts work in on the field. I think fans will love that. I think he'd like being here. Michael Pittman, definitely somebody who would be at the top. I mean, not Michael Pittman. Mike Evans would definitely be at the very top of my list of all the wide receivers, even over T. Higgins. And it might be doable because Mike Evans is not going to command that much money. And look, on my dream list, I have 4 names. One I think is unattainable, and that's T. Higgins. The other one I think is slightly unobtainable, and that's Chris Jones. But if you can get Chris Jones done, you might be able to get Mike Evans done as well. And then you might be able to get this third name. And this is one that I haven't heard anybody talk about, but it's Tyron Smith, left tackle from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the big hurdle in your way is that you owe Jed Wills $20 million to play left tackle for you for this year. And I know that that's a tough blow to hit. But if I'm the Cleveland Browns, I'm looking at this year as it. Right? Like this first window with Deshaun, or it might be the only window that you have with Deshaun. I feel like if it's open at all, it's this year. And you have to ask yourself this question. Do you feel like Jed Wills is good enough at left tackle to win the Super Bowl with? Or do you feel like that's a weakness that's going to get exposed in the playoffs? Not is Jed Wills a good enough tackle to win 13 games with? He absolutely is. Not if Jed Wills is a good enough tackle to get out the divisional round with? He absolutely is. But can you get to the Super Bowl when you play Kansas City, when you play Baltimore, when you play San Francisco, when you play one of these teams in the Super Bowl or very close to getting to the Super Bowl? Is having Jed Wills going to be what bites you in the ass? And I don't know if the answer is yes to that. But I also don't know if the answer is no. And me not being sure is enough for me to be like, hey, if I could just throw some money at Tyron Smith for a couple of years to handle this while I draft somebody I feel more sure about, I'm willing to do it. And Tyron Smith is a championship level left tackle, one of the best left tackles of all time. Now, he's not who he used to be. He's not the top of his game, but he's still really, really, really damn good. And for a team that wants to have as little margin of error, it might not hurt you to have Tyron Smith. And then if something happens to Tyron Smith, you could put in Jed Wills. Or maybe you want to rotate guys in there. I don't really care what they do with it, but if they have Tyron Smith, they're going to be a better team. And again, you could look at this list and say, hey, man, you might be able to get Mike Evans for a decent price. And you might be able to get Tyron Smith for a decent price. Now, Chris Jones is going to be expensive. No doubt about that. But you might be able to afford it if you move some things around and get some space around. You might be able to afford it. And boy, if you can make that happen. Ooh, boy, if you can make that happen. Get the cigars ready, because this is a team ready to win it all. Now, again, the big question is going to be Deshaun Watson, but you would give him as little to worry about as possible, right? You would give him a left tackle that's been championship quality. You give him one of the best young right tackles in the NFL. You already have one of the best interior offensive lines in all of the NFL. You already have one of the best tight ends in all of the NFL. You would add some wide receivers. You would add some guys around him to throw the ball to, which he already has plenty of. And all it would be up to is for Deshaun Watson not to mess it up. And that's a pretty easy situation situation for Deshaun Watson to be in. And if he could be anywhere close to his 2020 self or even better, which he would have to be, right? You want him to turn the ball over less, take sacks less, all of these things to happen less often for Deshaun Watson. If he's able to do that, take care of the football, make some plays here and there, and then the defense is going to be dominant, then, hey, you might be able to beat the Chiefs. So those are some free agent moves, some big deal free agent moves that I think would really move the meter for the Cleveland Browns. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.